We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you would please stand, we're going to say the invocation. Father, thank you for this day. And Father, we pray for our country as it goes through some tough times. And Father, we just pray for leadership and calm. And Father, we just pray that everyone can come together and find the best solutions for all of these problems. Father, we just pray for wisdom as we meet today. And Father, be here with us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And just in case, make sure everybody's social distance. Discover Odessa annual report. Ms. Sean. With a fashionable mask.
Yes. Reversible.
Oh.
Only wear certain colors, right?
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me today. My name is Monica Schauner. I'm the director for Discover Odessa. And to the right, spread throughout in here is our Discover Odessa staff. I just wanted to take this opportunity to just kind of let you all know what our department has done from October through the end of May with the money that you allocated to us. As you know, we are the marketing organization for the city. We do work with sporting events, trade shows, conferences. We work with all events that come through the city and try to promote those as best as possible. I don't know if you have the report in front of you, but on the first page, I want to talk about the economic impact that has happened so far through the end of May. You can see that October has been our largest month. In October, we had several events that month. The biggest one was the Southern Baptist Texas Convention that had 570 room nights. We had the Odessa Jackalopes Youth League Tournament and an ECISD gymnastics meet. So those are three of some of the bigger events that happened in October, and you can see that November and December tend to fall because of the holidays, and it picks back up in January, February, and March. In April and May, you see we have nothing, and that was all because of COVID. Everything was canceled, of course. On the right-hand side, which, by the way, the colors of both charts have nothing to do with one another, but on the right side, you'll see the total room nights that we've served so far. We've had 4,332 room nights. See that sports is our largest market. That does tend to be the case year in and year out. And we've had meetings and special events, reunions, and some tourism as well. Any questions on either of those graphs?
Any questions?
Down in the middle, you'll see the events that were canceled due to COVID. Several of these are annual events, so we expect them to come back next year. A couple of them I wanted to point out to you and highlight to you. The Odessa College Golf Tournament, that is an every 7-year tournament that is on rotation. Fortunately for us, 2022 does not have a host city. So Wayne Baker, the athletic director for Odessa College, is requesting that Odessa get to take that spot. That's significant because you'll see that it's going to potentially bring in 980 room nights. It is a national golf tournament, so it brings recognition to our city. So we're looking to hear from him and hopefully get that. At the bottom, you'll see the USA Track and Field Junior Olympic. That was another huge one that we lost, unfortunately, but fortunately, the meeting planner did contact us and they have bumped it up to 2021. I guess that was 4 years ago when we had it. It brought in $2,903,097 of potential, impact that it brought in that year. And it has a potential of bringing in 6,050 room nights. So it is a week-long event. So it's a significant event, but it does give us hope that we are going to have these events this coming year. Just so you'll know, even though that we had 2 months of no events in Discover Odessa, our work did not stop. We reached out to our hoteliers, our local attractions. Our marketing team went out and spoke to the restaurants and took pictures and promoted eating locally and put that all over on social media. We continue to work with the TACDB, which is the Texas Association for Convention and Visitors Bureau, about what reopening looked like and how we could encourage people to, once things started opening back up, to start visiting again. So our work did not stop during that time. Are there any questions on page 1? Okay. Page 2, you'll see the groups that we did service this year. There were quite a few through October through the end of May. There's the Southern Baptist Texas Convention on the right-hand side. You see that one. We had the Texas Crime Stoppers Youth Conference, Texas Association of Literacy Education, I point out those events because those events were something that our sales team requested, or sent in a proposal for, and we won those events against other cities. So what we do when we do that, when we bring those events in here, we provide name badges for them. We give them Odessa promotional items and literature for all the attendees. We work their registration. We work other activities at their events. We provide transportation if they requested. We give them accommodation assistance, and we also provide sponsorships depending on if they qualify for it or not. And then down on the RFPs and tentative bookings, these are events that our sales team is putting in, again, a request for. So these are potential groups that we're going to go in the hat, per se, with other cities to bring their events here in different years. Our Discover Odessa activities, if you'll see, these are just some of the things that we do when we're not doing the other stuff. I do want to point out the Odessa Friendly program. This is a program that we brought back into our department. We only got to have it one time because in January, but it is a three-part program. It's a free event that's offered quarterly. It's a three-part program that has the first part is taught by a certified instructor, and they teach you about being Texas friendly and what it means to be customer service oriented and just how to treat people in general. Everybody can benefit from that. And the second part is learning about all things Odessa, and that's taught by our staff. We really just talk about our local attractions, and we remind the attendees about all there is to do, because I think we forget and we take for granted what's in our town, and so we're instilling city pride during that time. And then the third part is a tour of the hosting local attractions. So in July, we're having it at the Wagner Performing Arts. They'll go through this class. At the very end, the attendees will be taken by a staff member at the Wagner Performing Arts, and they'll tell them about the building and, give them kind of a backstory. So it's just an experience that they'll get to have. But that's been a successful program. And also, we're a member of the THLA THLA, which is Texas Hotel Lodging Association. I know many of you have said on their webinars, they are such a great resource. And Discover Odessa budgets for that on behalf of our hoteliers. We budget for their annual fees, and it's not a small amount, but it's something we feel feels very important because they do advocate for the industry. And they reported to us that they've taken over 200 phone calls from just Odessa hotels for legal purposes, and they've taken over 3,000 emails from our Odessa hotel, so it's been a very valuable service. Any questions on that page?
I just had a question.
Yes.
On the upcoming events, are you pretty comfortable or confident that these will come?
Yes, ma'am. So if you'll see the Silver Spur Trade Show, that one just happened this weekend. We have reached out to the meeting planner and to Aaron Martin, who's the director of the Coliseum, to ask him what the attendance was like. We haven't heard back from him yet. That's really the first event that we know of that's been brought to Odessa at the Coliseum. We haven't been seeing the feedback, but what we're doing for these upcoming groups is we're continuously staying in contact with them and reminding them about the COVID regulations. We're providing masks, our hand sanitizers. We're doing everything we can to ensure them that we're going to give them the best safe, possible experience. Any other questions? Thank you for asking that. On the next page, page 3, is our marketing report. We do budget this particular budget. We have $243,000 worth of our budget towards marketing. It includes print and digital ads, billboards, brochures. We offer visitors guide, dining guides, and calendar of events to anybody in Odessa. We do Odessa giveaways, our promotional items, our Odessa app, we're a partner in that, and then our social media. You see that we're a part of all social media, but our higher follows and likes tend to come through Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We have 36,462 website visits. We do work with a company named Madden Media, and they give us our analytics on how long people are staying on our website, their click-through rate and things like that. Things that I know not very much about, but they tell us we're good. So, but that's where we market. And again, that's the biggest portion of one of the largest parts of our budget is towards marketing. Any questions on that?
So tell me what this means down here, this 200 over 96?
Yes, ma'am, let's see. Okay, so that is the amount of posts. And so the 200 are how many Facebook posts we've done, and the 96 are the Instagram and Twitter posts that our marketing team's done. Mary Raines is our marketing team. She's our marketing person. She does a great job about I'll tell you one thing I want to share that I just think is so great. She gets on our website and she highlights a couple of hotels. And she will reach out to them and let them know and send them a link just to tell them, hey, your hotel's being highlighted this month, and then she'll switch it up. But they are so responsive to that. They're grateful for just any additional marketing that we give them. So that's been a great asset that she's done. And we send them a monthly newsletter, kind of updating them on what our activities are, and they've been really responsive to that. So we feel like, you know, we have a good relationship. We haven't heard otherwise, so I guess no news is good news. Any questions on marketing? So the next page, on page 4, I do want to talk about our kiosk. And thanks to y'all, you gave us extra money to budget for this. This kiosk is going to be located in the conference center. This is going to serve as a presence for the city. As you can see, it looks like a large iPhone. We did go and meet with Sandra and her facilities manager. We located the two most highly trafficked areas upstairs and downstairs, and then dropped some lines so that it can plug into that area. But it will have icons for the dining, for the shopping, for the local attractions, accommodations. Our Odessa app will be on there, and it will just serve as a concierge, if you will, for the city. So, and that has been ordered, and that should be coming in the next 3 to 4 weeks. It's going to be shipped directly to there. Mary, our marketing person, is sitting through a training, if you will, and she'll learn how to upload and change that information. Any questions on that?
That'll be fun to see.
Yeah, it will. And I have to say, I have a friend that said she used one in Houston and said it was very helpful to her for dining purposes. So I'm excited to see it too. So that'll be a great way to advertise.
So do you upload it from the chamber, or do you go over and upload it on this board?
Well, we haven't done it just yet because we just ordered it, but I believe Mary will be able to do it from her computer. She'll
So
be able
you
to
can change it all the time?
Yes, ma'am. Is that right? Good. Yeah. So we're excited about that. And we do have to budget for the annual subscription. It's $2,400 a year, so we're going to take on that into our budget. They said that the hardware, generally you want to replace that every 4 to 5 years. And so that's what we're looking at. So that's some of what Discover Odessa does. And I just want to go through real quick the other budget that you guys let us have, and that's the Sports Enhancement Recruitment Program. This funding was set up in 2010 to give financial incentives to sporting groups to help increase hotel and motel revenues, obviously as well as increase the sales tax revenues. This is a process that's overseen by our sports committee. You see that we have 7 members from the community that oversee this. Our beginning balance was $65,000, but you graciously agreed to roll over some of the money from last year because some of those events didn't get to happen, so it gave us a larger amount and a lot to work with. You'll see that the first 3 darker blue events did happen. You can see what date their events were, what they requested, and what amount was granted to them. And I'll get into how that's determined here in just a bit. The next 3 are the 3 events that are pending, and so we're looking for those to happen. They have submitted their applications, and so once those events happen, then our sports committee will review that. And at the bottom, you'll see the 3 that had to cancel because of COVID. But again, 2 of those, well, actually, the Odessa Soccer Association, that is the West Texas Blowout, and they generally have that every year. And you can see what they've requested. Again, now this program, the event that's coming will submit an application into our sports person. Teresa Vasquez, she's in charge of this budget. They'll turn it in 60 days prior to, they kind of give just an indication of what they're expecting, what they would like, just kind of give us a synopsis. Their event happens, and then 30 days from that event, they have to turn in a post form. So they give us what they spent, they turn in receipts, and all that's compiled into a folder. Teresa then goes into our economic event impact calculator and plugs all that in, and it gives us the numbers that we need to present to the committee to let them know what the return of investment is for that event. So if you'll turn to the next page, we actually gave you an example, or we actually gave you what the first 3 events that happened, this is what they qualified for. So you can see the ECIC Winter Classic Soccer Tournament, their total impact was $140,287. Their return of investment that can be given back to them is $4,390. This calculator asks for different questions. They'll ask how many room nights, how many local attendees, how many out-of-town attendees, and we plug all those numbers in, and then it computes it and gives us these numbers so that we can have something to base off of the decision of granting them that money. So they, again, they qualified for 4,390. They requested 10,000, but that's not obviously what we could give back to them. So that's what we determine on that. So again, the next 2 and 3 pages, or page 7 and 8, are just the ones that we use for the first 3 events that we had. We use this calculator with our other events too, and Discover Odessa with the meetings that we bring in, or what have you. But again, it's been a great tool. That was something else that we budgeted for, and we're just really happy to have that because it does give us some numbers to work with.
So Monica, when it says what they qualify for,
Yes,
is that like a percentage of what was spent, or what is that? I mean,
So the net direct tax, the ROI, the return on investment, is what we base the number of what they qualify for.
but I guess that's based on multiple factors like rooms and
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
the things below in some sort of proportion.
Correct. How that, I'm not sure, and I can find out and call the company, but they did ask for our sales tax rate, so we gave them our local information, and then this calculator just kind of computes. And then there's different calculators, by the way. There's a sports calculator, there's a festivals calculator, there is business meetings, convention and trade shows, festivals. All of that is considered because sports, again, tends to bring in the most room nights, tends to generate the most revenue into our community. And so that calculator will offer a little bit more return of investment than, say, some of the others. But yeah, it looks at it based on transportation, space rental, retail. You see all the different sales by sector. And they base it off of what those calculators.
It's a fantastic tool.
It really is, and again, we use it for all of our events, not just this one, because our sales team that works with associations, like the Crime Stoppers, we plug in what they have, and that kind of tells us what we can give back for sponsorships or transportation or anything like that. So this is what we do in a nutshell, and it's a fun job, and we really enjoy marketing the city. Our team, I can't say enough about our staff. They're all in, and they do a great job in the areas that they work in individually and just as a staff overall. And so we look forward to this next year. I know that we're anticipating some budget cuts. We'll hope that maybe you'll consider what we didn't use for those first 2 months, maybe going into next year, because we did miss out on some events that we would like to attend next year. And also, it also gives us some money to incentivize these groups, because that's how we're going to stay competitive with these communities. Sometimes they ask for $1,000 or $1,500 sponsorship, and we'd like to have that money to be able to say, yes, we can give that to you, and yes, come back into our city. So,
Well, with these reports, it gives us the credibility we needed to be able to say, yes, it brings in this amount of money to the community, and it's justified.
yes, sir.
In the past, it's been, well, we think, and this is, concrete.
And I'm thank you, because that's the whole purpose of this. We really want to show you, we want to be transparent, we want to show you the work that's being done. And if you ever have any questions, you know where to find me, and we're happy to answer them. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it.
Any more questions?
So have you told Cindy, or will you be telling us what you have that you didn't spend on events as a carryover? I know we're trying to know those numbers before we do our grant programs.
Right now, we can have a guesstimate, but we really don't know until the closer it gets. We can look to see what we budgeted, obviously. So yes, ma'am, we should have those numbers and what we hope to roll over.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Great
Any
job.
other questions? Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Monica. The next is the Parent Study Task Force, the one and only.
I'm God that just wanted
Amen.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for allowing me to represent the Odessa Development Corporation today. I was appointed by Tim Edgman, our president, to help with the task force that was created by ODC. We facilitated that through the Chamber of Commerce. Economic Development Representative Wesley Burnett is basically spearheading that effort. It was interesting to me that Dr. Perriman, in the report that he prepared for Odessa Development Corporation here recently, that basically created a list of things that we ought to be doing to try to assist our community during these trying times. He said that there's never a more appropriate time for chambers to be engaged. And so it's very appropriate for us that we're facilitating this through one of our contractors of this Chamber of Commerce. What we did, we tried to identify some local oil and gas industry folks to participate in the task force. That's really where, we've had the double whammy of obviously the coronavirus and the oil and gas dilemma that we're in. And so we found Kirk Edwards. He's been very vocal in this regard with regard to protecting our industry, particularly in the Permian Basin and Odessa. Kirk agreed to chair the task force. He enlisted 6 or 7 local industry business owners and leaders. He likes to call them his oil show group. But that tells you they're from all aspects of the industry, which is pretty well represented, and includes Tracy Bentley of the Permanent Strategic Partnership. The one thing that I'd like to emphasize before I go any further at all, this task force is operating like we intended for it to act, in that there is a sense of urgency at the Odessa Development Corporation Board, and there is a sense of urgency at this task force. That was critical, and I'm really happy. And there are things that I'll brief you on, obviously, with regard to what's been done. What I passed around to you is the mission statement. Obviously the first thing we want to do is, what's your marching orders? And we put that together with Kirk. There's a primary mission and a secondary mission. The primary mission, and all of these initiatives, they basically are the top 4 recommendations that came out of the Perriman report. And one of the items that came out of the Perriman report, I know that the city's working on, which is some type of an assistance plan for residents and small business ownership. If you look at the first 2 items, you basically have an internal and an external marketing effort, if you will. The number 1 item, that Dr. Perriman came up with was, we've got to make sure that we continue to have a workforce here. We can't let these skilled people, very talented people, leave our community. So one of the things that we need to do is message to those folks that says, hey, things are not maybe what you think they are. He believes, and we believe, this is a relatively short-lived issue, although it's very deep and devastating, but it's very relatively short-lived. And so we're trying to communicate that, and the task force is already, along with CBA Advertising, ODC contractor, put up some billboards, and the message, there's multiple, I think there's a half a dozen of those. I know they're continuing to rework the messaging. Some of those are digital, so they can change that pretty easily. But they're basically saying, hang on, things are going to come back. We've been through this before. It's something we're used to. A lot of other communities aren't, but we are. So there's a lot of good messaging that's already happening. And then, but CBA has, along with its company called Articulate Strategy Communication. This representative in the marketing industry was a Kirk Edwards contact. So we pull CDA and this new marketing consultant together to formulate a strategic plan. That plan has already been through multiple iterations, which again, tells you what the sense of urgency is. It's about 30 pages. So, and what it does is it talks about this internal marketing effort, if you will, but then goes on to an external marketing effort, which is aimed at federal and state leaders, key players, and what we're trying to message there is the Permian Basin, and particularly Odessa, Texas, is a key to our independent energy goal. We kind of thought we had achieved independent energy until the Saudis dumped a bunch of cheap oil on the market, which tells you we don't really have that. We can have it, but it's going to take some kind of acting, and I don't know what that is, whether that's legislation, whether that's some kind of directives or whatever, in order to prevent the Saudis from dumping a bunch of cheap oil on the market, which devastates our industry. Kirk again has been very vocal in that regard, and so one of the things that's already happened, we haven't got this strategic plan finalized. It should be very shortly, and then it'll go to the OEC board. But one of the things he's already done is through the contacts he has on his task force is made some contact with the Trump administration. Okay, how can you guys help us? And we've also determined that we're going to use another consultant who is particular expertise in messaging, strategic messaging at the federal level, and somewhat to the state level as well. But you're talking about elected officials, key staff members, key players in that world. And there is an art and certainly some skill to trying to get that message and making it productive and effective. And so I think that's a good item that's really come out of this the work of the task force. The secondary missions are basically secondary because somebody else is already working on those. We know that the compliance committee has been charged with working on some type of a grant or loan program. Now, I'll tell you that the initial meetings with the compliance committee is probably going to be something really difficult to do with regard to putting together some kind of, it's probably going to be very difficult to execute some kind of loan and grant program. But what came out of those discussions was, are there things that we can do to educate some of our small business owners in the community who may or may not have been aware of other programs that are out there and may or may not know how to go about it. And maybe they need some assistance, some guidance, some education, if you will, some mentoring. And so that's probably what's likely to come out of this secondary mission. Hopefully we'll be able to put something together, and it certainly may be something that when we go back into our internal marketing effort, maybe that's a part of that as well. The fourth item is basically the broadband, upgrading, if you will, our broadband offering in this community. And what we focused on at the Odessa Development Corporation, which has already been in the works for some time, is trying to determine how can the Odessa Development Corporation facilitate additional infrastructure. I don't think there should be any confusion that the ODC wants to be out there offering broadband service. That's not what we're interested in. But if we can assist, for instance, the school district in what they're trying to do, and other entities in the community, then that's what our intent is going to be. Motran has provided some really good information with regard to where our needs are. This task force is going to canvass oil and gas industry folks locally and say, okay, so what do you really need? We know there's some information coming to us from the school district that says students are not getting the education that they could because basically they don't have access. Well, what about businesses that don't have access? And what do they need in order to get that? So that's also, that input will be coming to the Odessa Development Corporation, as additional input that says, hey, don't forget about the oil and gas industry, the local small businesses here, because, they're probably going to change the way that they do business, and if they haven't already, and need to be able to need to have good access. I think the other thing that's really important that this task force is going to try to do is lay the groundwork to allow other key players to participate. You think about PSP as an obvious one, but some of the maybe Midland Development Corporation, for instance, they like our plan, what we're trying to do. They may want to piggyback what we do, which would be great because obviously, as we know, we're better together. And so, we want to make sure that what we deliver is not so proprietary that nobody else can help. And we're going to obviously leave open the opportunity for people to help. And you think about, okay, well, so what's all this going to cost? I think that's always important. We believe that through the end of our fiscal year, we've got enough marketing funds available to do what we want to do, including another consultant with regard to this federal and state messaging. What's going to be interesting, and I think very good, is that when we get to the budgeting process and prior to approving next year's budget, we'll already have some track record with what we've spent and how effective it is. And so we may be coming back with, I think the budget's going to look different. I don't know whether it's going to be more or less, but it's probably a likelihood it's going to be more than less. But we want to apply those funds very effectively, very productively. And so I think for now we're fine. But I guess just give the council a heads up that our budget's probably going to look a little different in the marketing area. The last thing I'd like to say is that because of this sense of urgency with regard to trying to help us locally, the task force is a permanent agenda item. It's an agenda item until further notice, because we want to make sure we got the report from Dr. Perriman, that we're not just sitting on it and not doing anything. I think that was a very well thought. That was a very solid thought from the Odessa Development Corporation Board. Everybody wants to make sure that we take this information. We got it very quickly. The strategic plan is coming about very quickly. We want to implement it very quickly, and we don't want to forget about it. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have.
David, isn't there a percentage of revenues that can automatically be spent for marketing?
Yeah, I think the limitation is 10%. Yeah, 10% of our budget can go to marketing.
Other questions?
I just had a
Go ahead.
comment. Just thank you for the urgency. Number 3, when you mentioned that you all or someone would target people who may not know the process, or whom, I think that's really, really important that we're inclusive, because there's some small businesses out there. They don't have a clue that this is even going on.
Right.
And so I think marketing to everyone and just thinking out of the box ways so that all businesses have the opportunity, to know this information. It's so important, because this is driving me crazy. Excuse me. It's like I have to take but it's to me, it's really important, that we include as many businesses as we can from, just to be inclusive. And a lot of times people miss out just simply because they didn't know where to look. They weren't in the loop to know where to look or where to apply. And I think that's really, really important.
We had some input from Peggy Dean in one of the meetings that we had that, basically said exactly what you're talking about. Can we find ways to reach small business owners? Because anybody's creating jobs around here and capital investment, that's what economic development is all about. And we certainly want to preserve that. So I think that's really a key point here, is to make sure that we find ways. Maybe a business doesn't have a really strong banking relationship that might help. What can we do to help in that regard? So
Right.
maybe we enlist the banks to come up with ideas and maybe we take what that input, and that's our message that we try to get out in different ways. One of the things I think that could one of the players in this could very well help us is the Small Business Development Center at UTD. So we're gonna try to get as many people in the wagon with us to try to get done what we can. And I think that is extremely important, because you don't want to, you if you had 10 small businesses with 10 employees, that's just as devastating as if you had one business with 100 employees. And it's the same effect. So we want to make sure that we take care of those folks.
Thank you.
Okay, y'all excuse me. Number 4, about the broadband, eligibility. What areas have you put your ideas into that?
Well, I don't think that there's we've not facilitated anything, but Wesley can probably speak to that better than I can. But he's been on this subject, obviously, before I got on the ODC board. But we got some information from Motran, and in fact, we've got additional information that says, here's where the needy areas are. And I think we're continuing to expand that, so let me speak to that.
Yeah, and I don't know whether we're this or not, but, so we've been working with Michael in the school district and a company called NetSync, another company called, I lose track of the names, but we are in the process of working with the Motran information, that the study that was done that showed the areas. We know that West Odessa, Western Ector County, and the southern part of Odessa is very underserved, but we also know that our entire community, our entire county, does not have any real good options for this particular thing. So it's been very evident, as Mr. Bhutan said. We're actually going to have a meeting on Monday or Tuesday of next week with the school district and the city in order to facilitate and coordinate those discussions, and then move that along. Michael and I met with Midland city officials last week also about their initiatives and where we are. And honestly, we're way ahead of Midland as far as this whole idea and structure is going. So it's just a big thing to get our arms around, but we're definitely getting the right players, not only public entities, but private entities involved in that. And one important thing is to develop a business model that shows what this looks like from a financial aspect and also a build-out aspect. And the school district has done a lot of work to get some of the backbone in place to all of their campuses, so we're going to be able to build off of most of that. So that's a really good thing as well.
Okay.
Councilmember Sheldon, one of the things, we'll get you a copy of the Motran study.
Okay.
Well, one of the things they discovered was, you have Cable One or Sparklight now, and you have Grande. They had an area that they were surrounded, but there was like donuts, you had a hole in the middle of it.
Right.
So one of the things is they can go to the companies and say, if you're all around it, why not just cover that part? And so that's one of this study's a fantastic study, and it looked at everything, all the companies and everybody.
Okay.
So it's really good.
The reason why I brought that up is because the area where I'm at, especially where my church is located at, we don't get the broadband, we get the dial-up, and that's slow. And right now, when I'm doing stuff at the church, especially on the internet or on my TVs and stuff, you get a reverb. To the point is, it's so slow that it has to catch up to itself. So that's my concern, not just for my church, but the area itself, because a lot of people have complained about that dial-up. The dial-up is one of the slowest things you ever want to deal with. At my house, I have Grande, but at the church, I have AT&T, which is a dial-up, and that's bad. So that's my concern was that.
Well, we'd always said that getting the infrastructure in place, the device issues are being addressed by the school district well, and hopefully the companies are out there to be able to provide devices. But the dead spots all of those things.
Mhm.
There are the service companies that have to provide the service. We don't want to be in charge of the Wi-Fi,
Right.
daddy, the Wi-Fi is not
Right.
working, that kind of thing.
Right.
So we want to make sure that the backbone and the infrastructure is in place in order to be able to provide those capabilities. And this is infrastructure, just like water and sewer.
Right.
Now Wi-Fi and broadband is the third leg of the stool to make everything work, so we want to be a big part of that.
Right.
And the cost issues is what keeps it from being built out, so if we can be, in some form or fashion, facilitate that. That's what we
I appreciate it, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for getting me that report, thank you.
Wes, is there still work on potentially some temporary lines and stuff? I mean, I know overall it's a big project, but at one point, you or somebody talked to us about that where we could put up temporary portable type lines.
Right, the school district was really working to do that and making their facilities, their elementary schools or their schools in each one of these zones as being possibly a hot spot or something like that. You see the white pickups with the little extra thing on the back, that's a booster type of a thing, so they're able to get some Wi-Fi on a location. So it's that concept that we're really gonna, because this can't happen tomorrow, it's gonna be a build-out
Right,
process.
that's
So
fine.
what you're
Mhm.
saying is that in between times where we can possibly pop up some, I think they're called hotspot kind of things where you can serve certain areas and stuff.
Right.
But the big challenge is the infrastructure again, but also the device issue. We've had some comments like, what if it's all out there, but they don't have anything to get on it with? So the school district, I tell you what, has really stepped up through this whole process in getting every student some form of a device.
Mhm.
And I think the business community is also doing that as well. We've seen what work from home looks like, so.
Right.
And that's a need that everybody can understand, and you can buy something, but if they can't if they don't have any access to the internet, it doesn't matter if they have the device, so.
And if I can go back to the education for the small business loans and that sort of thing, we met last week on this, and Michael has already done some work as far as people fund and other companies that help facilitate some of these processes with communities. So I believe some meetings are going to be happening. You know, the education part of this is the big factor, so we're going to be trying to address those as well.
Okay.
One final point on that, because I think it was a really good question. If you think about economic development in our community long-term, one of the things we need to do is ensure that we are offering businesses who want to come into the community or want to expand in this community a very high level of broadband service. And so there's multiple motivations of why we want to do this. Certainly there's a short-term need, but there's also a very, very viable long-term need.
Especially for the kids.
Yeah.
And especially in light of COVID, you know, we don't know what August is gonna look like. So as Peggy was saying, a short term, the
Yeah.
modems or whatever, because I'm afraid they're gonna really need them in August.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you for your support for the OEC and for the chamber and all we're trying to do for Odessa. So we appreciate your support.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
David, thank you. Please thank her. Okay, item 3, consider annual renewal of Motorola Premier One software. Mr. Perry.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Basically what this is our yearly maintenance bill to Motorola in the amount of $370,000 and $308 along with it. This will cover another year. This is for our CAD and RMS system for our public safety.
For the privilege of using Motorola equipment.
Absolutely.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Next, we'll open a public hearing to consider approval of a request for zone change to office district. Mr. Brennan,
Mr. Mayor?
we are going to vote on this?
No, not
Just-
today,
it's
that's
just
got a
information.
Mr. caption and put in there like that. This is an old grill site that's at 37th and Inglewood, thank you. And it's been a grill site forever and ever, never has been activated or been used or has any type of working apparatus on it. But to the north and west are apartments, to the south, single family, and to the east or sort of northeast, there's an assisted living facility in this area.
You can see that we had one protest there, and the card that was sent in related to concern with property value going down. Actually, the biggest impact on property value is the drill site. Once we eliminate the drill site, and this is developed as a professional office facility, property values in the adjacent areas should go up appreciably. And that's what the request is for, is to rezone to office development, and it will be a professional office, it will be a medical facility that's proposed for this development. Staff was recommending approval, and Planning and Zoning Commission did vote unanimously to do so. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any question? So we'll take care of this next week.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Item 5 is an update on the fencing ordinance.
Yes, sir. We addressed this to kind of take care of some of the issues and folks out there that are kind of flaunting the fence ordinance that we have, some of the things that they're putting up and calling a fence. What we've done here is just address the materials being used, the standard or the industry accepted materials will be used for fencing. This would be for either a new or a repaired fence. And also that certain items or materials that cannot be used, such as barbed wire, razor wire in a residential area, or those same materials in a non-residential district, but that's on property that's adjacent to a residential district. And it also added a provision in there, in the ordinance that fences and walls must be maintained in a safe and well-kept manner. And this is mainly to address fences that have been run through at no cause by the owner, but they stay unrepaired for a year or so at a time. So we felt we needed to address that and put that in the ordinance also. So that's what we got with that. We got to answer any questions. It's fairly simple and straightforward.
So we don't have this ordinance, that wasn't in our package, was it?
No.
So we'll get it, so we'll vote on it next time, is that it?
Okay.
Can we get a comment on that?
I just had a couple of comments on that. So this is currently addressed in our ordinance thing, so we wanted to propose this to the council. It really resulted of some recent complaints about what would be used in terms of fencing material. And we recognize that we have not had that. And so we wanted to make sure that certainly the council was agreeable, we would define what those materials were. And we've seen everything from plywood. The strangest one I've ever seen was a fence made out of cars.
Made out of
cars.
I've seen one stranger than that.
What's that?
I've seen one made up with, what you do, inside the house.
Insulation.
Not insulation, but,
Sheetrock.
sheetrock.
That one will last for a long
That
time.
one was,
So again, this is just really an attempt to make strengthen our ordinances and make sure we are, this will fall obviously on the building inspections department.
Okay, good.
I just wanted you to be sure it was in our package so we could read it before because we hadn't seen this before.
Michael, how do we decide how long that is? Fences and walls must be maintained at a safe. So 6 months, 2 months?
So certainly in terms of fencing, I think obviously a block fence would last considerably longer than a wooden fence. We will look to our building inspections department to give us some guidance on that. Wooden fences obviously don't last.
You know, wood posts deteriorate and the wind blows them down.
Yeah.
How long are we gonna give them to fix the fence?
Well, typically what happens is that we give them a notice of violation, and there is a specified time period in that violation. Oftentimes they take care of it in that time frame. If not, then we've got an entire court process that we follow.
and I think the city has always been very reasonable. If someone's showing a good effort, or they can submit a plan of, what they want to do in a timeline that, I feel certain that the city's gonna, be responsive to that. But I know I am very concerned about some of those in my district, and I'm glad to see it.
Well, will we grandfather those people whose fence is already fallen down?
Yes, sir, we have to.
Okay.
So if they've already fallen down,
No,
they have to be
no, they have to be
grandfathered?
maintained.
They have to be
all
maintained.
that. But fences that are existing, they will be grandfathered.
He's talking about the materials currently constructed.
Yeah.
Sheetrock.
Yeah.
She
Now,
brought
one's
this
right
to
off
me.
of Oakwood, that the fence is different colors of corrugated metal. I mean, it's just put up and there's all different colors.
Yeah.
But it,
But it still has to be maintained, is that right? And
Yeah.
then, once it falls in disrepair, then they have to meet the new fencing requirements?
Yes.
Is that
That is
right?
correct.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Next, consider ordinance to install traffic signals. That's all you do, Al.
At least I'm consistent. Good morning, Mayor and Council. This agenda item is similar to what you saw last time. At last council meeting, you approved the bid award for construction of signals at Evans and 87th and Dawn and 87th. This agenda item is just to get it into the city ordinance that those intersections have a signal. So that's what this agenda item is for.
Housekeeping.
Yes.
You're not asking us for any more money?
No more money.
All right. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Thank you.
Next, consider award of bid for CIP projects and sewer line replacements. Ron. Good morning.
Morning.
This item is for 2019 CIP water and sewer line replacement. And we are proposing to change approximately 11,500 linear feet, which is approximately 2 miles of water and sewer lines. And it is approximately in this triangle area, which is University, Kingston, Maple, and North of Flow Street. We have 3 bidders on this project. The lowest bidder was PEC Exploration in the amount of $1,134,289, which was approximately 13% below of our estimate. And can answer the question.
Any questions? It's nice to have them
Would it be
underneath.
low here?
Yeah, below instead of above.
and
It is,
these are-
yeah, 13%.
do these jobs require the contractor to bond?
Yes.
So, I mean, because you know, when something is so much, I mean, this below, you want to be sure that they're, I mean, I know you know all that, so I was just curious what kind of recourse we have for bonded jobs.
You know, contracts like that have a performance payment bond
Okay.
for the value of the project. I was just gonna note, this is a project that you may remember some press last year about the rusty water issues. This is a line that had, these lines had a lot of breaks on them over the history. They were some of the lines that were highlighted on last plan for replacement, so.
And this is in our budget, this is something we were already.
We're using the last funds of our CIP from 2007, so we're finishing off those CIP funds. And then we're using some of, we have some capital replacement funds that we have built a small amount on, and so we're using those in this case. It was not originally in the budget specifically, but those funds were there.
Like everything in water, something comes up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, consider outside agency request for funding for FY 2020-21. Ms. Muncy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So first, we're going to talk about the outside agencies, and I'm giving you the sheet that I gave y'all before the council meeting last week. There's been a couple of updates to this, so you now have that information. We expanded some on the Odessa Arts Council. That was still kind of pending when I gave this to you last time. Again, reminding you that it's got a line drawn through it. Those are some of the events that were canceled. Also, at the back of this is information that we got from Mr. Ham regarding what's going on with the Arts Council. So he's going to have some savings. I don't know that he could quantify what that amount is going to be exactly yet. It does depend on whether things continue to play out. There's also kind of the timing difference because they run their grants on a calendar year basis, and we run our award to them on a fiscal year basis. So he's thinking, will we change it from spring to fall because of the coronavirus? Fall may fall outside of our fiscal year, but it falls within his grant year. So there's some timing issues there. So that also complicates that a little bit. And so he's going to be prepared to talk to that a little bit next week during his few minutes of presentation. We all are making this decision next week. I think one of the other ones that we were talking about, we did mention the air show had canceled. So I think they're going to ask for that just to be reiterated next year. This shows the funds remaining on chamber, but that's just the last quarterly payment, so that will be paid to them. They do expect us to return some funds, but I haven't gotten that amount from Monica yet. You heard that discussion earlier. Let's see, the only other one that may have changed, the Odessa Links Conference. They're going to take that to a virtual conference versus an in-house conference. And they're wanting to still use the funds for that, for the making the change in advertising and how they're going to do it. Some additional costs they'll have with that. And they're looking at adding maybe a speaker to kind of enhance that a little bit more. So they do plan to use their monies for that. We talked earlier about the fair is still going forward. That's going to be the end of August to the 1st of September. UTPB Athletics, we haven't really gotten anything back from them. They had a change in who heads that up. And we contacted them, but we haven't gotten anything back from them yet. And so hopefully they'll speak to that next week as well. And then at the bottom, we added what your general fund allocations are to outside agencies. These are not really based necessarily on events, but just funding to help those out. So as far as we know, they will probably still seek out the remaining amounts here. Okay. And they will be presenting to you next week as well.
So the West Texas track was also postponed, correct?
Yes, and so I believe in their application for this year, they just asked to roll those funds over.
So have those funds been distributed?
We paid them a little bit of money, $4,600. That was for some promotional advertising stuff.
And so we can, by law, just roll it over and just maybe consider this year.
So in the meeting next week, based on how they present to y'all, do they want to roll over, or do you want to have them refund the money back? Could be different with different organizations. Like for instance, the Air Force, that would be real easy. They didn't have any of their monies yet. That would be really easy to roll over. If there's some that just have little amounts left over, like Fiesta West Texas or something, then you wouldn't have that case. You might just let them refund it and then do their allocation based on what they present.
Oh, Steve will ask for all of it.
Oh, yeah. And so,
I'm sorry, can I ask you a quick question?
You sure can.
On that, I don't know if you can answer it or not, UTPB's first five, it
Yes.
shows that all of their funds are still remaining, but
They haven't requested it yet, so, and I'm not sure, have you talked?
I know that COVID really, they're working a lot, they're working specifically going out to families.
Yeah.
And so because of COVID, I think that created the complication.
yeah, I mean, I guess I was just thinking, if this was awarded last year,
Why didn't they use it during the school?
I mean, they had quite a bit of time to, I'm just curious if that program's still
We will
alive.
request an
It is, it
explanation.
is
of
very
some
much still
funds.
alive.
Yes, it's still alive. We'll request an explanation, you can give it to you guys ASAP.
Okay.
And it doesn't even mean it hasn't been spent, they just haven't asked. for
They
it.
just haven't.
And again, their program involves a lot of contacts going directly to families' homes, and obviously because of COVID, I know that impacted that.
Yeah, that's-
Yeah, and a lot of the, and UTP athletics is notorious for bringing theirs in September 22nd and wanting everything. So we're generally paying them after the end of the fiscal year, but, so sometimes it's just a matter of when they get their request into us.
Okay.
Okay. And, we had talked, I believe I provided y'all with the information at the last work session regarding what our projection looked like. Does anybody need me to go over that again with y'all as to what our proposed numbers look like?
Has it changed at all?
No, it hasn't changed, but I do have copies if y'all need them.
Yeah, we need a copy just to make sure.
It hasn't changed that much, did it?
No, it hasn't changed.
Just be on the safe side.
Yeah.
And so, y'all typically, I'm sorry, do what?
So much.
Yes. And so y'all typically ask the city manager or myself what your game plan should be as to how much you want to allocate out. I think our discussions have been, 3 million or under. That's something that y'all stayed pretty close to in the past. We went a little bit more than that last year, but the years prior to that were at 3 million or under.
Especially since we don't
And that's
know.
strictly just a guideline from us.
So Cindy, it would be up to the agency when they present next week to say, I want to roll this over.
Yes.
We don't advise or anything, we just.
But they do.
I mean, you can advise if you want to. If you
And then they
wanna
can
say,
still ask for more even though they're rolling.
Well, that gets a little tricky, and that,
Exactly.
you need to think about that when they're talking to you about, so if they're rolling over, did they take that out of their current request? Or do we need to deduct it out for you?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So you just have to go through fine, each one. Okay.
Okay. Item 9, discuss water
And this is
sewer.
gonna be, where are we gonna do this?
This is gonna be at the Marriott, at the conference center.
Conference center?
Big conference.
Okay, all right, no problem.
Item 9, discuss water sewer, CIP, and funding.
I'm gonna beat this bit.
I may have to get a breath before this one.
Okay, so, on the cover, I've kind of given you some ideas about our conversations with the Texas Water Development Board. Initially, we talked to them, we found out about, what the savings would be versus a typical market rate COSU. And it's a 1.25%, or they call it basis points, but it converts to 1.25% below the market rate. And that's the market rate at the time that you actually sell the issue, okay? So all my numbers are based on what if the market rate is this. I don't have a crystal ball to say that's what it's gonna be. So keep that in mind as we go through all of these scenarios that I've put together for you. And so we knew that one of the big things with going through the Water Development Board is the idea that you have to do environmental reviews, that it is state and wage rate requirements, you have to use American iron and steel requirements, there's a 2% loan origination fee, there's various plans that the city has to have in effect, which we have, so that's not an issue. So one of the things that you can get a little bit more of a discount with is if you use disadvantaged business enterprise program. this is where they have to advertise for disadvantaged business, low income, high minority business owners, so forth and so on. And you have to do this with your subcontractors as well, so it's not just looking at your main contractor, okay? So that adds a level of intensity to it that is hard for your general contractor to take on, okay? So some of these additional requirements, we talked to Hutch Muslim, am I saying that? With Corolla, who is our design engineers for the project. And so typically they're looking at maybe a 3% design change cost and a 5% construction change. And that's due to having to change to the American Steel, following Davis-Bacon. So all of these requirements add an extra cost to them, okay? So the next step would be to do a project information form, what Texas Water Development Board calls a PIF. And that's prepared by Corolla, so that's part of the increase in cost, okay? And they have to provide their preliminary design, okay? So once we go through that process, then, and it doesn't take council approval to go through that process, okay? So we can get the go ahead and do that. So then we actually go through the actual application process. And if we are approved by the board to go through with the issuance, then we would follow that up with the environmental review submission, and then the final submission of the plans would come late January. That's when Corolla expects to be complete with the design. And then probably start construction along in May of 2021, okay? And this is a 3-year construction, okay? So that's kind of what the steps are with the Texas Water Development Board. Typically, they state a 3 to 5 month timeline, but George said typically it runs more like 5 to 7 months. So if we start on that, then we would be good to go by the end of January with an issuance.
So with the Texas Water Development Board, I mean, it doesn't sound like we're really saving anything.
And we'll look at that in a minute, because it does save you on your debt issuance costs, and we'll look at that. It's
Okay.
looking like about $300,000 a year
Okay.
in what you actually pay out. So basically, and we'll talk more about it, you roll some of these extra costs into what you actually issue debt for. So instead of $95 million, it's going to be something greater than that. And we've got the stuff to show you how that plays out. Okay? I would like to tell you that I think the Water Development Board is very interested in having us on board. I don't know if that's strictly political or if that's because they obviously want more people to utilize the board, and that grows what they're able to do as well.
It bolsters their agency importance if the more of the state participates in their program.
Okay. So we've asked George, our financial advisor, to put together some information. And so that's going to follow. So when we have you turn to page 2. So this is sources and uses of funds that he lined out. The very first column on the left is if you issue just directly at a market rate, just like we typically do. So the bond proceeds amounts are greater than the $95 million because it will cover your cost of issuance, your underwriter's discounts, and other costs of the issuance of the debt. The next 2 columns are if you had no increase in your cost of construction, which we don't think that's very likely to happen. So we'll kind of skip those 2 columns. So the next 2 columns, and they're exactly the same. I'm not sure why I presented it this way, but it'll make sense when we get to the next page when you talk about non-equivalency versus equivalency. But basically, you'll see that we've added $4,750,000 to the cost of the project, which is 5%. Then you have your cost of issuance, which is a little less, okay, than if you did direct issue, but now you've got this 2% Texas Water Development Board origination fee that they charge you. So that's 2.1 million. So you're actually borrowing 102,180 versus 96,060, okay? If you'll turn over to the next page, you'll see he's done a summary kind of what those require as far as payments. So the first one at market issue, he's assuming an interest rate of 3.25, okay? So that would generate an annual debt service of 6.5 million. The second is if we had no increase in the construction cost. Again, number 2 and 3 are the ones that I'm saying are probably not very likely. We've already been told that there's going to be an increase in construction. So let's skip down to number 4. So we're looking at an issuance of 102 at 2%, that's 1.25 below market. Non-equivalency, that means we're not going after disadvantaged business enterprise program, mostly because that makes it harder to find subcontractors and stuff when you start doing
It's
it.
hard enough now, anyway.
Well, and that's kind of what we've been told. I mean, it's certainly something we can try to do, and it's still, it only saves you 30 basis points, so it's not significant. So that would generate a debt service of $6,198,000. So you can see there that there's an annual debt service savings of $300,000. And then number 5 is just if you did the additional 30 basis points, would take it down to 1.7, and your annual debt service would be $6 million. That may cause some additional time on the contractor to go after the disadvantaged businesses, so that savings could be enough. So the following pages are just the amortization schedules as they were provided by George. For the first one is just the regular market at the 3.25. You can see in your initial year, 2021, you probably would not have a principal payment because the debt wouldn't even be issued till late January. The first payments are made on principal annually, and typically those are in March. Interest payments are made in March and September, okay? So you would have some savings in the first year just because you wouldn't have the principal payment. And that's true on a lot of the analysis that we've done. And then the next page is if it's at 2% under the Water Development Board. And that's just assuming that that's the rates that take effect. Okay? So let me point you to the next page. This one has all these funky colors on it. So
what we just talked about is just for the plant. Right?
yes, this is just for the plant, the 95 million for the plant. That's the only part of our needs that really meet what you can do under the Water Development Board. Because once you start doing, we talked about this before, once you start doing water lines and sewer lines where you're covering a long stretch of ground, your environmental review gets horrendous. And you can run into lots of problems with that. That's why just the plant and that it's self-contained in the area we're in would not cause much in the way of environmental issues. Okay? Thank you, Michael. Okay, so this is Cindy's attempt to make this as clear as mud for y'all. On the left-hand side, I've listed the projects and our costs that we looked at before, we've been looking at for a while. The plant, the northeast development, which includes Line P, which we think is critical to get started on. The southwest development, then your development of cost participation. This is where developers are developing an area. They only need a 2-lane street coming into the division, and we're saying, no, it needs to be 4-lane because, that could add growth to different areas that split off of that. So we pay that upcharge from a 2-lane to a 4-lane. That's typical of what the city's always done. Same thing with water sewer lines. It may only require an 8-inch, we say it should be a 10 or 12-inch instead, so that's what that entails. And that's an estimate over a 5 to 6 year period. Then our replace, distribution, and collection. This is the $6 million a year that we wanted to add for the reason we just passed $1 million, was it $1.3 million? Because we have a lot of old lines that are just falling apart. And this was part of what came out of our water sewer master plan. And then lastly, it's just the existing of the old debt that we do still have from 21 to 27 to pay on the old debt in the water sewer fund, okay? So I've put what our pioneer funds look like and what our existing debt and their cost, distribution and collection replacement. So, that's kind of the generality of what we're talking about. So funding option 1 is exactly how we presented this to you back the first part of February. This is at 4%. We didn't go in and change the rates because that's just playing with numbers, okay? So this would cover everything 1 through 8, all projects, and then 9 and 10 were going to be paid out of the pioneer funds, okay? So we presented this to y'all before. We had had George and them run it to where we could start out at a lower amount in 21, gradually bring it up to the actual amount of the $14,865,000 that would go from year 2023 through the 20 years, the end of the 20-year payment out on the bonds. And so that was a 5.64% interest, y'all will recall that. So I've given you the current water sewer rate for a 5,000 gallon use customer is combined water and sewer is $56. 10,000 is 96.96. Now remember that is water and sewer, so we're raising both rates by the same percentage. Then the next year we would add an additional 4%, so that brings the bill up to $61.52 and $106.53. And then additional 5.07% in the third year, and that would bring the bills up to those amounts reflected there. And so at that point, the debt is at a steady payment, okay? Now, the old debt pays off in 2027, but I'm not sure, I mean, it's hard to tell you what's going to happen past 2 or 3 years, so just keep that in mind, that that does play out in 2027. So option number 2 says, okay, let's borrow the $99.75 million through the Texas Water Development Board, okay? And so that's our 95 original cost on the plant plus the 5%. This is at 20 years. So the first year's payment we looked at earlier was $2,043,000, and we're not taking out any old debt because we're still going to have to be paying that, okay? Because we're using our pioneer funds to work on line P, okay? So different scenario, okay? So that would cause us a 3.62% increase, and then you can see the rates applied there. But what that means is, project 2, which is line P sewer trunk line, we're going to start and pay out of our pioneer funds, okay? We have got through 2021, which will get us through, should get us through the construction. With our balance we have currently, and looking back up under the heading pioneer funds of $16 million, then what we get in 20 and 21 would amount to $31,188,000. So we would have enough money to fund the Pioneer project. This puts on hold, in this scenario, I'm showing, we're not including line Q, the 24-inch water line to the northeast, the storage tank, and then the southwest development amounts, okay? We would cover the development of the cost participation. We could cover that out of Pioneer funds at $1 million a year, okay? project 9, which is replace distribution and collection, would be $6 million a year. The first year, we would need to use fund balance because we're using the Pioneer funds to cover line P. But after that, into 2022, we could then be using the Pioneer funds to help with that, okay? And then we would still be paying our, number 10, we would still be paying our current debt ongoing out of our operations, okay? Option 3 provides exactly the same thing, except let's say we decide a year from now, we want to go ahead and go forward with our development areas to the northeast, to the southwest. Then we would issue COs in the amount of $64 million to cover that. And that would be, and George didn't do this calculation, Cindy did, so it might be a little bit off, 4.4 million. Now we could use, going into 2022, we could use some of our Pioneer monies to help offset that increase. And so that makes our annual payment coming out at $8,196,000. I've made that adjustment to that payment. So that would be an increase of 10.89% in order for us to cover that development area, okay? And then scenarios 8, 9, and 10, those projects would still be covered the same.
A lot of work you've done.
The difference between option 1 and option 3 is not a whole lot of difference, as you can see. We end up with a total increase in option 1, 14.7%, and option 3 is 14.51%. So it's a matter of timing about what we want to do. I will remind y'all that a lot of the stuff that's in this $64 million is outside your current city limits, okay? So that's to develop outside that area. So if that requires annexation, then we have an issue with, do we just get our property taxes? Because that's how it stands right now. Plus we would get water sewer rates for those that got onto our system. But as of right now, we're not getting any sales tax out of that annexed property until something changes with it. So it's just food for thought in your studying these numbers.
What's the interest rate on the old debt?
The interest rate on the old debt, I believe is at 4.25%. Not positive, I'd have to look at it.
So really, the bottom line to the citizens, $1.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about, and we talked about this when we presented this, the original, and mind you, I'm not sure 4% is where we're gonna be at in January. It may get to that. Who knows?
Yeah.
It just depends on what happens. But originally, that's only, if we do it the right way that it was set up, that's only a $3 increase a month for the 5,000. Now, when you go to 10, it is higher. So, I mean, it is an increase to their monthly bill, but it's not a $10 or $20 increase. Okay, so it's not as significant as you would. I mean, these are big numbers that we're talking about here, but the impact to, to our citizens is not as critical as it was.
And that's $3 water and sewer, that's the total.
Yes. But it does grow.
Okay.
I mean, the next year we have to increase again, and the next year we have to increase again by 4% and 5%. Okay?
This is what we talked about. In order to be able to sustain a real program, we would have to look at incremental increases annually.
Cindy, do you feel good about the Pioneer numbers, even with old down?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to mention that. So you'll notice that our number for 2020 for Pioneer is $6.5 million, and for 2021 is $8.5 million. So typically they're paying us about $9.5 million. there is a clause in their agreement that they can bank any overages they took over their minimum requirement. So in the first few years, they banked some because they were taking more than they needed. We've already been approached by Pioneer. They are exercising that this year because of the situation with the oil and gas economy. So we have decreased our expectation of what we will be getting from them. And then we don't think they'll take any excess usage. Midland's plant and their sale to Pioneer comes online in a year.
September, October this year, their Midland expansion of their plant will be done, and that'll be able to supply.
And Pioneer helped pay for that, so they have
Another source.
yes.
They pay about $1,000 on the water after they pay for the plant expansion, where they pay us about over $6 a thousand, so the Midland water becomes cheaper.
Okay. So, and like I said, these numbers are gonna change some. I mean, this is the best scenario I felt like I could give y'all at this point. Behind this is just the amortization schedule, and the fact sheet that we talked about earlier. But let me send you back to the front page. So I want to talk a little bit about our fund balance in water and sewer. Oh, just say, sorry.
Yeah, just one quick question. Now, the increase on these rates, we're only applying the increase to this new debt because the old income that we are making on water and sewer right now is still required to pay the old debt.
Yes.
So we're just talking about using this incremental increase.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why in option number 1, when we were talking to y'all earlier about we were going to use Pioneer funds for the annual replacement and the old debt payment, that's why we were subtracting it out here.
Right.
But we're not doing that under options 2 and 3 because we've changed tactics of what we're doing here. Okay? So,
If I could, we'll just touch on a couple of things that, where it says 5,000 and 10,000 on the customer rates, that's gallons per month. I don't
I'm
think
sorry.
And that's, but that's a customer who uses 5,000 gallons a month, that's the rate that they would pay.
Right.
The customer uses about 10,000 gallons a month, that's what the customer uses.
and then it'll go up.
Right.
Okay.
And then on the Pioneer contract, we have a take-or-pay contract, and so those funds further out are under the contract guaranteed amounts. They'll use those amounts of water because they're guaranteed to pay those anyway, so that money should be guaranteed.
Yeah. Okay, so, I have, the audit is nearly done, it's in quality control review as we speak. So these numbers I feel very confident about. So our unrestricted portion of our fund balance for water and sewer is reflected there. A big portion of that obviously is for the Pioneer funds. And it shows the 31 million.
That's number 1.
I'm sorry, I went back to page 1, I'm sorry. I'm looking.
Okay.
Almost 15 million of that is encumbered. That's why on the scenarios, we were showing y'all the net amount of 16, because that's a small project that's ongoing. It's the, and then the design of the plant. So that's still encumbered, okay? And then we have some other encumbrances related to water and sewer. So that leaves us a net balance. Now, the credit rating agencies say that the optimum amount that you should have in your unrestricted and balance should be 180 days of your operating expenses, okay? So that is what I'm reflecting there to show you what's available. I don't know that the city, I mean, we may have in the past been at 180 days, but it hasn't been in the last 10 years that I've been here that we were at 180 days. Or exceeded 180 days. so that's very good. Does it mean you absolutely have to be there? No. But it does look much better for the credit agencies if you do have that. Okay? So I'm just letting you know that there is some money there available, showing you what budgeted revenues are for the current year that we're in right now. And current expenditures, we did not do a rate increase. One of the things that we will approach you with during our budget is, last year we did do a rate increase with solid waste. And we talked about that we needed to do these small rate increases each year so you didn't have to come in and do big ones when you experienced, significant increase in expenses. Even with the debt issuance, we may look at something along the lines of a small increase in water and sewer, just because costs keep going up each year. And one of those costs is typically our purchase of water or CRM. Just to kind of give you an overview, know that we're asking for any type of decisions today. I'm giving you a lot of information to kind of look through. I'll be happy to answer questions. If somebody wants to recheck my numbers, that's always good too. And George is available if we want to bring him in to talk to, if y'all want to listen to his side of and what we're proposing and just views about that. But I guess we would ask, do y'all want us to go forward at least with the PIF with the Texas Water Development Board to see what that looks like?
We are up against the revenue cap. I know we can't push it into next year. It counts against the revenue cap, doesn't it? What was passed
For
last
water
year?
and sewer?
Yeah. I guess it wouldn't, correct?
No. You're thinking property
Yeah.
taxes?
Just making sure, you never know what they're gonna do.
And the PIF is really just a pre-application, so it's kind of for the Water Development Board looks at it to see if it looks like it's gonna comply with their requirements, or if there are any major complications, and then they turn around and they ask you to apply if it meets all of that type of thing.
So we can go through that process.
We're under no obligation if we go through it, right?
No,
What
no.
kind of, when we say, yeah, let's go ahead and do it, if we say that, what does that mean to you all in terms of time?
My understanding from, and we had a good phone conversation, I kind of alluded to it, but it's in detail here. Michael and Philip, Tom and I met, did a phone conference with George and Hutch with Corolla to talk about this after they had a conversation with the Water Development Board. And from what I understand, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, is that this would probably be mostly on Corolla to do. They would need to take their preliminary design and do a little bit of something with it, and they would actually kind of fill out the preliminary. Now, it is going to take some information from us to do that, probably provide some of our plans that they require, which include our projects have to be consistent with the current state water plan. We have to be listed an intended use plan, and then a water conservation and drought contingency plan. So I think it's going to take some time for us to help with that, but I think the majority of it's going to be done by Corolla. Which they're not cheap, they're not free. They don't. So that savings is starting to come back.
So what does George think about what our bond rating's gonna look like? We had a hit last year because the retired
Well, we
pilots.
did and we did, because Moody's moved us up, and S&P rated us down,
Right.
which is basically never even heard of. I mean, when George called me, he was like, I've never seen this before. I've never seen when one goes up and one goes down. And they weren't even on even par, I don't think. So, I will tell you that though the big problem with that was pension and OPEB plan,
Yeah.
which that's a problem for most municipalities and county governments as well. The 1/1/19 actual evaluation of the firemen's, as you well know, Peggy, is what goes into our 9/30/19, and that didn't look great. The TMRS's investment returns didn't look great either. So we had increases in those total liabilities. You'll see that in the capper. But the 1/1/20 looked much better.
Much better.
And that's thanks to the council for allowing us to increase our contribution to the fireman's plan and make that more viable and getting some more firemen hired in. Hopefully we keep them through all of this virus and downturn in the economy, but those were some significant issues as to what. I don't think he thinks going through the Water Development Board is really going to affect our credit rating. And I'm not sure how much they even really do with the credit rating if we go this route.
Well, I know with the water, the Texas, well, I was just trying
Yeah.
to see if that's a factor. We
It
need to
is a
consider
factor
if we
because
did the
we
CO.
are issuing debt, so that's obviously something that they're gonna look at. How much debt you have to your population and other items. What your fund balance looks like, so the fact that we're at the 180 days looks great. So those are some of the things.
I just wasn't sure how this total environment, you know, the double whammy of oil and gas and decline and then COVID,
Yeah.
how that, when we go out with the CO, how that's gonna be looked at combined with where we were. Because we don't have that issue with the water board.
Right.
So is that something we need to, I mean, that's something that is a consideration.
And I think so, and I think that is one of the reasons maybe we move forward with the TIF and at least see whether we're gonna be accepted by the Water Development Board or
I
not.
agree. And that's really where I was going when I said, you know.
Have you heard of any municipalities that have dealt with the Texas Water?
I've dealt with them, San Angelo's funding for their new water source in the Hickory was done under the Water Development Board. We did major plant expansions there. The Water Development Board itself is a very good resource in Texas. I mean, for funding, ECUD, all of their funding for their expansions will be through them. Now there are, because it is state and federal funding, you do have more things you have to deal with. But all in all, as a state agency, they're very helpful to the water and sewer funding.
Because of the different procedures and policies, does it slow down the project?
It can slow down the front end of the project getting done, getting that put together because of some of the things you need to make sure and comply with. Environmental can be a concern. And especially if you're talking about raw land and you're working across raw land, you have to worry about whether there's archaeological aspects. We had to pay $750,000 on an archaeological aspect in San Angelo that they found. We found hearths underground where we were working and things like that. So, especially if you have to mitigate the site. But in getting those clearances, to make sure that you're not disturbing archaeological aspects as well as if you come across an environmental problem. Those are probably the more difficult issues that you might have to deal with in terms of raw land, long areas. But the other aspects are more administrative type things you have to take care of. And they do add a little expense, but the savings in your loans may be a little over, is more than what you might see there.
Are we concerned, are we concerned about environmental, since we would only be using that for the water rehab plant? I mean, the environmental.
I think that's the reason we're talking about the plant.
Yeah, and this is why the Water Development Board makes sense for the plant. It is an existing facility, so environmental requirements should be minimal.
Right. So when we're talking about that being an issue, we're really saying it's not going to be that big of an issue because we're doing it on our own existing water.
It's already there, Peggy.
But I kind of took it, is that where those concerns would come in would be P&Q? for the
Yeah, but
most
we're
part.
not using their money for
No.
PIQ.
But
No.
that would be a concern there.
The other requirements, such as Davis mentioned, section 3 requirements, are all things that the ultimate, whoever we hire to help us oversee the project would be in charge of. But those are things, and the reality is, a project of this scale, you're gonna attract launch contractors who already have experience with these sort of requirements because they've done them on other projects. So we are, as a staff, aren't necessarily scared of that because we know that there's, again, we're accounting for that additional cost, and we know the companies that we would probably work with are going to be familiar with those.
Okay.
I would personally think that we need to go ahead with the TIF application based on.
Tom, what do you think?
I have a question. Well, when you're determining, forecasting water and sewer rates, are you considering the fact that we're going to have more and more users come online and help pay this debt?
Yeah, I mean, that's not built into the scenarios that I gave you. One, we don't know how fast development will happen, so we don't know, does that come in year 2022, 2024, 2026? So, I mean, those are, obviously you're gonna have more users if you expand development. There's the sales tax question too, so there's lots of things that will happen, and so, no, we basically used what our current revenue source is, and we didn't add revenue to it to apply those percentages, because don't know how we determine what that new amount is gonna bring in, but it will bring in some, obviously. So there's
Surely we have some idea from looking at the past, although I think our growth was slow a little bit.
Right. And we don't know what growth's gonna look like even now, so.
One, touch on say the 64 million that we talk about is the expansion of the city, say, type areas growth. And one of the things that water and sewer have an effect on with regard to that is without a sewer system, the minimum size lot that you can develop is a half-acre lot. So that's 22,000 square feet plus or minus, okay? That's a bigger lot. And that's if you have a potable water system that comes to you. If you're going to have your own well and your own septic system because you don't have a public water system and a sewer system, the minimum size lot you can develop is an acre. That's 44,000 square feet for a house. With the public water system and sewer system, you see us developing 5,000 square foot lots here. The density for Beatonbow and D.R. Horton. So when you go to ad valorem tax values, there's going to be a tremendous benefit to whoever gets the ad valorem tax off those properties. But if you don't get the sales tax, you're creating a huge benefit to whoever is receiving that area by bringing this water and sewer there, because they can be much denser and should have a much higher total ad valorem per square foot value. And that helps them in both ways.
Right, and sales tax only applies to commercial entities. I mean, there's big portions of this that's gonna be residential, but there is commercial, there's sizable commercial that's gonna go in there too, so, so that's just something to keep in mind when you're.
Cindy, I know the plan, not the plan, but any of the other infrastructure we're going to put in the ground, can ODC help with that?
We're approaching ODC about some infrastructure. It should be geared,
Yes,
we'd like to
towards
see
economic
geared
development.
more towards economic development. So that's not always necessarily a residential area, although it could be. We did do that to some extent with the shortage of housing to make affordable housing, reasonably priced housing, I have to say that correctly. So there may be a way to do that. I think we're looking at some things along between some in that area. I think it's more to fix what we had existing to make it a little better. but it's not the key elements we were talking about here in the 64.
Is everybody good with going ahead with the plan?
Yeah, can I ask one more question on
Yes.
that? On that 64 million that is outside the city limits, is that PQ, I mean,
No, so that is 3 through 7,
okay.
the gray area.
The Q, line Q is the northeast system, which is the
Okay.
water elevated tank, and the
Okay.
southwest system.
Because of where we're at right now with the apartment buildings and stuff that are going up and the situation with Line P, I think Michael's talked to all of y'all about that. I think we're going to go ahead and put that out for bid to see what that's going to come in at, and we're just going to take that and pay for it out of Pioneer funds. We don't see a way to get around doing that. So I think instead of, trying to, we couldn't do it under the Water Development Board anyway. We don't necessarily need the CO issuance to happen today for most of the stuff that's going on. So we need to get started on that, so let's use Pioneer funds for that and get that done and covered while we make the decision on going forward. We can do the PIP, that gives you that idea of whether we were accepted by the Water Development Board or not, and we may not be. I don't think that's a likelihood from what we've heard from them, but at least we get a firm answer, and that gives you that option going forward. And I am not going to talk about this until next week.
You might, because after we go through it, we may have lots of questions.
Lots of
All
questions.
right, we'll move to item 10, the CAFR update.
Never say never.
Never say never. You're right. Okay, this is short and sweet, and,
Please.
the CAFR update is, I hoped we could go over it today, but it is in quality review, and I don't like to bring an audit to you that hasn't been through quality review, even though we don't expect any changes to that. As far as I know, there's no findings, they haven't given me anything. But our plan is to go over that with y'all in briefing at the meeting next week, so we're starting early. And,
Just this one time.
yes, and so we're gonna have the outside auditor present that and discuss that with y'all. And then we're gonna turn around and go into council meeting and ask you to approve it. So it's a little unusual, and I apologize,
It is what
we
it
are
is.
way farther behind than I ever thought we would be. You will also have some internal financials by next week. Hallelujah. We're finally getting our new system kind of figured out and creating some financial statements there, so we will have those for y'all. And we may even mail them out to y'all so that y'all have something to look at. So that's my update on this.
Thank you.
Are
Thank
we
you.
going to, I know last year Dewey and I sat down with the auditors before it actually came to, if we're not going to do that this year, then could we still get a copy of it? Because I would like to get it next week and look at it. And
Those books will be delivered to you Friday.
Okay.
Okay, and we did plan to set up a meeting where we're inviting Dewey and Peggy, since there are a number of people. Anybody else that's
Peggy is.
interested, that would like to go through that.
Well, I'm interested.
Is it your first time?
Be my first time, so I like to be a part of that.
Okay, no problem.
What time are we gonna start next week?
Start at 4 or 5, Randy.
I believe we said 5.
Right.
Oh, that's
And
easy.
they-
So we have the CAFRA, and then we also have all of the
Yes,
hotel
We're
motel.
gonna wear y'all
So
out.
it's gonna be a while.
Wow.
Bring your supplies.
All right.
We pull
I
stuff
need-
off, just so we wouldn't do it.
Is dinner gonna be served?
Dinner will be served.
Good, okay.
And are we doing
Peanut butter
council
crackers.
here and hotel motel at the? we're
We'll
doing
do
all-
both of them.
Everything's gonna be together.
Over there.
Conference center.
I have one other question, just for clarification. On the hot money, the 3 million target that we're talking about, does that include the general fund number?
No.
Thank
It doesn't.
I need to thank you very much, Cindy.
Thank you.
I
Thank
need
you,
a motion to
Cindy.
go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are recessed for executive session to consider the evaluation of